Well, what a pleasure it is to invite an old Facebook friend, John Williamson, all the way from Europe in Scotland, I believe. John, is that right?
It is, mate. We go back, don't we? In Facebook terms, we go back.
In in Facebook, look, if we had the friendship that we have on Facebook, in reality, we'd be bosom buddies. How's
We
that
were
for a
best
thought?
mates.
All
Yeah,
right.
best mates.
Look, it is a pleasure to have you on the show, John, and I've been looking forward to this discussion, this conversation for a number of reasons. One, because you're a professional copywriter, one who is and has been self-employed for some time. Well, let's just stop there for a moment, because not everybody who's watching you now on YouTube, John, or listening to you on one of the channels would know what a copywriter is or does. What does a copywriter do?
Okay, so that's an interesting one, Mike, because nowadays it means many things to many different people. When I first started years ago, there was only one kind of copywriter, and that was a direct response copywriter. So you were the guy that you were influenced by Dan Kennedy, you was influenced by Ogilvy, you was influenced by all the direct response people. And basically, as you know, because I know we're pretty much old school, me and you, aren't we? You actually wrote stuff to get a reaction, to get a sale right here and now. Copywriting nowadays, I looked at somebody's website yesterday or a YouTube channel. I think they had 180,000 people. Subject was copywriting, but it was content copywriting. And so as we know nowadays, that can be anything from, outsourcing your Facebook post, which a lot of people do, writing advertorial, all sorts of stuff. So any form of writing to, I guess nowadays it would be eventually convince somebody to do business with you. Whereas in the old days, it was do business today.
Okay. And you've got a stack of books there, which I know are strategically placed. You've got a whiteboard behind you there because you do. You've got quite a strong following of copywriters and freelancers and entrepreneurs, and you do live and pre-recorded webinars, and I highly encourage our listener and our viewers who are interested not just in copywriting, but just in the idea of persuasion and how to put a message across in a persuasive but in an integral, honest way, and get results not only for the person you're attracting to your message, but also you, the writer or the publisher. So there's a link to where you can find more about John in the show notes. But coming back to copywriting, among other things because you're a consultant and you do other things, and you've been self-employed, a paid independent freelance copywriter consultant for 35 plus years?
Yeah, 31, Mike.
31 years. And there is a story. So one of the reasons I was so much looking forward to you being with us, John, is because not only the profundity of your experience and the wisdom you share, but the great stories you tell as well. And I'm wondering if you could just share one of the stories. If I throw out the bait, would you be able to respond and just give a bit of the story to us?
Yeah,
all right.
Of course.
All right. So thank you. So the story I love is how you sold your shoes to help get your first copywriting clients.
Yeah. And so, oh, wow. Where do we start with this one? Because in fact, if anybody's really interested in the story, just literally set up a YouTube channel like 2 days ago. The one and only video on there at the moment is a 16-minute video where I show people how I did what I did to get my first 6 clients. But I'm going to tell the story leading up to that, because I think the story leading up to it is more important than the actual story of what I did itself.
Yeah.
It's about attitude. And what I'm teaching the copywriting community, my little part of what I'm teaching, because there's a lot of people teach them how to write better copy, how to, do all that kind of stuff. I don't touch that kind of stuff. I look at the business of copywriting. How do you get clients? How do you get yourself ready to get clients? How do you overcome your limiting beliefs with regard to, am I good enough yet? Will anybody employ me? Why me? And all that kind of stuff. And so I was blessed, Mike, by doing 7 years in the life insurance industry, commission only direct salesman, before I went into copywriting. Blessed, I say.
Indeed.
It put skin on my back.
The only thing better would be if you told me you're a door-to-door salesman selling vacuum cleaners. But keep going with the story.
I've written another post about that, and it's called "Daddy Was a Kirby Vacuum Cleaner Salesman," because my old man, bless him, was a Kirby vacuum cleaner salesman.
No
and I
way.
swear to you, I must have, from a child of 2, 3, 4 years old, this stuff must have been going in inside of me, listening to practicing in pitch and all that kind of thing.
It's in your paradigm, without a doubt. Tell us
So
about
basically what happens is this. You know, we all have times in life where we're not quite sure where we're going to go next, and we don't know how it's going to work out, and we haven't got a plan and all that kind of stuff. Well, I found myself in one of those situations where I was in my 20s. I was like in between the life insurance business and what am I going to do next, and how's it going to work, and can I do it, and all that kind of thing. And I literally came across a copy of this book here, and that is the original book from 1991, Dan Kennedy, The Ultimate Sales Letter. And so I came across this book in the bookshop. I bought it, I read it, and I'm like, man, this is insane. Like, I don't have to go out and see people anymore. I can write one letter and send it to 10,000 people and still be in sales. And my mind was literally blown. Pretty much about the same time as that, maybe 2 or 3 months before, and I got a copy of How to Make Maximum Money in Minimum Time by Gary Halbert, which is another absolute classic, which I recommend to this day. People go and get. It's outdated in terms of the techniques, but the philosophy, the mindset, the attitude that Gary had towards going out there and drumming up business and making stuff happen, that was my original inspiration. I was like, man, people like this exist. This is insane. Like these entrepreneurs and wildcats and things like that. So I read that book, and then I read that book. And then basically between the two things there, I thought, I'll come up with an idea. I'll come up with something completely different than nobody else is doing. And literally at that moment, I was like, it wasn't that I was down to my last tin of beans. I wasn't in that situation, but I needed a bit of money. And literally I had a buddy come around the house, and he was looking at my church's shoes. You know, the church's shoes? I don't know if you guys get those down in Australia or in America, but they're like really expensive shoes. And I paid hundreds of dollars. But even back in 1991, hundreds of dollars for these pairs of shoes. They'd only been worn a half dozen times because they'd come out of the life insurance business. And he was admiring them. And I went, take them off my hands if you want. And he literally gave me the money. And I took that money and I bought postage stamps and envelopes and printer ink and all the rest of it. And literally got things set up from there. And that was it.
It's a great story, and I encourage, again, particularly if you're a new or a budding copywriter or somebody who's thinking about, or your interest is piqued in listening to John explain the story about copywriting and how he got started and how he sold his shoes. Go look John up. I'll put a link in the show notes where you can find more about John, and sign up for his free YouTube channel. All channels on YouTube are free. But John, so you put pen to ink, so to speak, or keyboard to ribbon in the old typewriter, and you knocked out a letter of some kind that you put in the mail, and from that, business people responded to those letters, and you generated money.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what a copywriter does.
Yeah, and it's that quick. And so my philosophy is this: if you're a copywriter and you're going to go to a client and say, if you employ me and give me some money, I'm going to show you how to get people to give you money, then I ought to be able to write something for myself, which I can send to people, which is going to get that. Do you see the point here? Yeah. And what most copywriters do, they learn copy, and then they sit back and go, right, I need a client. Where are they? Who's going to ring me up? I'll do a fancy Facebook post. They're not actually selling themselves. They're not using the skill they've learned, even at a rudimentary level. I read one book, and a week later I had 6 clients. Even at a rudimentary level, they won't get into the business of, I'm a salesman, because that's what we are. Yeah. Salesmanship in print, as it was originally, that's how they coined it. Direct mail is nothing more than salesmanship in print. They don't go, I'm a salesman, and the first sale I'm going to have to make is selling me. And so my big message, and this is interesting, Mike, I'm seeing this more and more, although pretty much all my posts, my channels, my newsletters and stuff like this are orientated towards the copywriting world. I'm getting people way outside of that industry now who are reading. Somebody yesterday said, I've just read all your posts, every post I could find. He has got nothing to do with, he runs a brick and mortar business on a high street somewhere. He says, I've read every single post because I can see how this applies to me just as much as it applies to a copywriter. It's a mindset. Yeah. It's about understanding. And quite simply, Mike, if you recall, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you before, but the whole concept between that, about that original mailing was this, that people have headaches and we need to present ourselves as an aspirin to that person with a headache.
Mm.
And if you sort of like think about that consistently, like people got headaches, and when you got a headache, you need an aspirin. It's an analogy, obviously, but when they've got that, and my principle is this, that what we do is we write to them, we involve ourselves with them, we interact with them in such a way that that headache turns into a migraine.
I love it.
And then when they've got a migraine, what do they need next? They need super strength pills, and lots of them. That's us.
I love it. I really do, John. And there's that wisdom coming through. You know your stuff. There's no doubt about that. So what about the millennial or the younger person who's listening to you, watching you now, and thinking, no one writes letters anymore. No one sends letters in the mail. Well, postage stamp. What's that? So what's copywriting like today in the 21st century?
Okay, guys, so if you're listening to this and you don't think direct mail is still relevant, it's relevant today as ever. In fact, it's more relevant today than ever. Yes, we have to rely on a dysfunctional postal system in most countries nowadays. However, don't let that get in your way. There are still ways of using the direct mail to get huge results. There's still there's nothing like that pattern interrupt of you're picking up your pile of mail, you're sorting it in a pyramid, big stuff on the bottom, it goes up until the small stuff's on the top. That's a lot of psychology about always mail small stuff, never mail big stuff, because that always ends up on the top. And when they look at it and it's got handwritten address on it, and it's got a postage stamp, they go, who's this from? Now, listen, that's different than when you say, who's this from? Where's this from?
Mm-hmm.
Who? People buy people before they buy products and services.
Yeah.
And so the first thing is you want to get yourself in that state of them thinking, who's this from? And then that physicality of opening it up and pulling it out and unfolding it, like there's a lot of stuff going on there which we can utilize in terms of engaging people, in getting their attention with whatever graphics we're putting on there, whether they open it up and something falls out on the table and they go, oh, what's that for? You know, there's a whole bunch of stuff we can do in direct mail which you just cannot do in any other medium. And David Ogilvy, he called it his secret weapon.
Mm. Yeah.
I call it my secret weapon because to this day, it's my secret weapon. Like if it's gone to the head time, like you have to get a result. I'd say to somebody, what would you rather do? Send 100 pieces of direct mail or 100 emails?
Mm. And what answers do you get?
I'm going to send direct mail every single day of the week. I ain't going to risk my life on 100 emails. Does that make sense? So much more we can do in that. So listen, I'm a huge fan of direct mail, and it's not unfounded. I'm a fan of direct mail because I've seen the results it can get, and you know they blow everything else out of water. I'm not saying it's the only thing because we do all sorts of other stuff nowadays. We do all the online stuff and everything else. But you know, I would encourage people to give direct mail a second look. Like don't overlook it, and don't be put off with the fact that you've got to put money on the envelope. Like you got to buy those stamps. There's something about sitting there thinking, I'm just about to drop $100 on postage compared to I'm just about to hit the button on the email to say go. There's something about this has got to work because I'm putting my money into it rather than free that makes you think different about how you're going about it. So, you know, I'm a huge fan, mate. I can't deny that. I'm not going to deny that.
And why should you? For heaven's sake, why should you? You know your stuff. You know it works. You use it still, and you teach others how to use it. And that's one of the reasons why I was so keen for you to share your time with us and share some of this, some of your stories and your wisdom. A question then, again, for the person who may be just starting out in copywriting. And you mentioned earlier about it being mindset more than anything, more than skill set. And so we're coming here, we're dovetailing now, John, into the overcoming adversity, coming back from setbacks concept of the discussion. And so tell me, has it all been for the last 31 years? Has it all been beer and Skittles, or has everything been handed to you on a silver platter? Have you not had to go to sleep and wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with any worries about things, this, that, the other? In other words, what do you say to the new or even the established copywriter who may be going through the struggles the common struggles of copy? And I wanted to ask you that too. Sorry, 2 questions. What are the common struggles that a new copywriter can face? And 2, have you ever faced any struggles at all, and how did you overcome them?
Okay, so most of my struggles have been self-imposed.
Can relate.
I put my hand up. I am a fully paid up member of the Idiocy Society. Okay, so
Oh,
I've screwed up many, many times. I've got into deals which I shouldn't have gone into because along the way I've run businesses and owned businesses and things like that. And I've made some big mistakes, like costing like tens of thousands of dollars of mistakes. And so here's the thing about, and I hear exactly what you said. And I was laughing when you said it because I could see where the conversation was going. Yeah, we all have downs. We all do. I don't care who it is. And I've offered in the past with people to do a trade. Like, we'll you give me one of your problems, I'll give you one of my problems that I've had, and we'll see who gets out first. And I guarantee 90% of people will be out before they got to it because I've had some massive stuff in my time.
Yeah.
Here's, and I was talking about this with one of my mentor groups the other day. This is super, super, super important from my perspective anyway, is to be able to get yourself to live in the present, in the moment, like so in the moment that it's almost untrue. In the moment, like a Navy SEAL is in the moment when he's in a situation. In the moment, like a world-class boxer is in the moment in the 7th round and somebody's been hitting his head for the past 7 rounds and he's still there trying to be composed, trying to be cool, calm, collected, and making sure he's in that position to put that punch in. Cool, calm, and collected, like a brain surgeon that comes into a surgical situation, even though he's got all sorts of other stuff going on in his life and who knows what that might be. But in that moment, he is 110% present. There's nothing else affecting his thoughts. There's nothing else affecting his behavior other than this is the only thing on the planet that's worth giving my attention to right now. And so the thing that I have trained myself to do, and we're sort of trying to put some stuff together on this at the moment, trying to unpackage what it is. But the main thing is this. We all have stuff going on around us all the time. We're all affected by our past. Like we've all got stuff we bring with us. Yeah, we keep bringing this big weight with us all the time. There's stuff that's happened to us that we don't like, stuff that's happened which we wish never happened, all that kind of stuff. But we bring that to the present. Or we're worried about the future. So we're there thinking, what's tomorrow going to be like? What happens if this happens? What happens when? And so people are splitting their attention all the time across those, what I call those 3 time zones. So time zone 1 is today. Time zone 2 is yesterday and the past. Time zone 3 is tomorrow and the future. Mm-hmm. And so at any given moment in time, Mike, most people are 25% in the past, 25% in the future, and only 50% in the day. Mm. But it gets even worse. Because in the day, like right now, you and I don't. What time is it for you? It's 8 a.m. in the morning for me.
Yeah, it's 7:20 here p.m.
Okay, so you've had a day's worth of stuff happen to you, and now you've probably got the rest of the evening off, and that's it. And I'm just got up, and I've got the day ahead of me. Yeah. And so at 8 in the morning, there are a whole bunch of things happened. I've done a whole bunch of work already. There's emails come and gone. There's requests being made of me. There's a whole bunch of stuff. When I'm in this meeting with you right now, I'm 100% present. Mm-hmm. I'm not thinking about some of that stuff that's happened this morning, which I'm going to have to deal with. And I'm not thinking about all the stuff I've got to do for the rest of the day. Some good, some bad. Yeah. I'm actually present in this moment doing what I'm doing right now. Whereas most people, they're 25% in the early part of the day, the 25% thinking about, the brain is engaged with what happens when I have that call later on today. How am I going to manage it? What if this happens? They're thinking about this in the background all the time. So they're only literally 50% here in the day. So 50% of the day versus 50% of the moment, that's 25%. So most people are only 25% with us right now because they're thinking about everything else on the planet. They're letting other things get inside their head. They're dealing with their anxieties, their worries, their frustrations, their fears. They're dealing with all that stuff on a minute by minute basis. And what I've done is I've conditioned myself to ignore all that stuff. Like I can have the worst possible meeting coming up 3 hours from now. Like it could be, I don't know what that meeting, but it was something that like nobody wants to attend, nobody wants to be in. It's going to be disastrous. It might cost me a lot of money. That could be there, and I promise you, I would not give it a moment's worth of thought until 5 minutes beforehand.
How did you develop this philosophy? Did you learn it? Was it passed on to you? Did you acquire it by default?
The first time I ever noticed it was when I was 17, and I was in the territorial army in the UK. So I used to give my weekends up to go and do it in the evenings and, be in the army that way. And then we used to go away on a camp, I think it was a 3-week camp in summertime. And I went up and the paras were there, the parachute regiment. There was about half a dozen of them there. And there's a whole bunch of other people. And I noticed, I looked at them, I watched the way they behaved. I watched the way their attitude was at any given moment in time. And they were what I would become to define elite level people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They were there, right there, all of them at any given moment. They were there, ready to go, cool, calm and collected. Yeah. In the moment. So my first observation was that. And then I started to notice other people along the way who seemed to have this otherworldliness about them where they weren't flappable. Like they could have all sorts of stuff going on, but in that moment they were there and they dealt with the other stuff when they had to deal with it and not a moment before. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so basically I absorbed that because I'm very reflective. So I see, Anthony Robbins, what did Anthony Robbins say all those years ago? And I think he stole it from somebody else, but success leaves clues.
Yeah.
And I look and you look at modeling and all that kind of stuff and you go, okay, so what is it about that person? What is it they've done? And if you look at all of these people, whether it's the boxer, the brain surgeon, the elite level military, whatever, they drill things. They do stuff over and over again. They do the basics and get good at the basics over and over again. They don't want to skip steps. They're prepared to do the conditioning to get good at doing something, if that sort of makes sense. And me, it's the same in business. Like you can condition yourself into that state.
If our viewer or listener is curious to know more about the concepts that John has just described, follow up with John or check out Stoic philosophy, because you've just described one of the components to Stoic philosophy, which is to put a circle around yourself and in the same way block out yesterday and tomorrow. Let's go back to even Dale Carnegie, who is famous for his book How to Win Friends and Influence People, but he's less known for a very good book, if not even a better book, in my opinion, which was How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. One of the chapters in that book, he actually describes that same concept about blocking off yesterday, blocking off tomorrow, and just living the moment of today and the now.
So let me put my hand up here then. It's almost possible, because I was reading Dale Carnegie's stuff in my teens. So 14, 15, 16, that's when I got my first copy of How to Win Friends and Influence People. Yes, I had the worry one as well. It's very possible that I read that and I internalized it, and then I started to practice it and notice other stuff around me, which made it work. So hands up to, listen, Mike, sometimes I read a book when I was 14 called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling by Frank Vetcher.
Yeah.
I read that book until it fell to pieces. Many, many, many years later, in my 30s, somebody gave me a copy of that book because I mentioned it in a seminar, how it had been so important to me. Somebody went and bought one and brought it back in the lunch break and said, it was in the thing, I've got your copy. I flicked through it and I could not believe how much of the stuff in that book I'd internalized myself and I was now sharing with other people, although I'd not looked at it for like 15 years or something. So
this is so important, John. Sorry for stepping on your words there. Pardon me, but this is so important, the point you're making here. So the wisdom that I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm off the planet here, but the wisdom that is in these books by the great classic authors are, I think, even more relevant today than they were back in the 20th century when they were written. And like you say, you wrote it, you read, and how relevant is it that you bring up that title, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling by Frank Vetcher? If the listener or viewer has not picked up that book and you are in the business of being successful, go to a library, go to a secondhand shop, whatever you call them in your country, thrift shops, op shop, go anywhere, go online, there's probably a PDF of it, and read that book. It's a classic and it's a ripper, as John has just mentioned. John, I think that's probably, I always say time flies when you're having fun, and our time's almost up. And there's so many more questions I had prepared in my mind to ask you. But this has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm really grateful for you to jump on to the show and share your time with us in this way. I just want to ask you, and again for our viewer and our listener, there'll be a link or links where you can find John online, go to his YouTube channel, go to his Facebook account, and make contact with John. He's a very, very approachable. He's very busy, and he guards his time, but he's very approachable. And I would recommend that you follow up. What parting advice might you give to because for some reason, John, what keeps flashing inside my mind is young, newbie copywriter struggling, needs to hear some encouragement. Have you got something?
I guess the thing I'd say, which I'm sort of getting quite famous for saying, is the most important sale you're ever going to make is selling you on you. Because people buy people before they buy products and services. And if you've not sold you on you yet, don't expect them to buy that product. Okay. Yeah. And so the step back behind all this is people try to use discipline or hustle or whatever. But if you really haven't sold you on you yet, you don't like yourself. You're not like, you don't find yourself of value to the world and all that kind of stuff, then you're going to struggle. And one final book recommendation, Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz is the one book I have referred and recommended 1,000 times.
Yes.
As a manual for life, not a, hey, I'll quickly flick through that. I've literally read that book 100 times. Yeah. Right? I've got a copy on the floor right now. It's torn up in pieces because I've been teaching it to people recently. And so what I do is I tear all the chapters out so they're individuals so I can just deal with them one at a time and all that kind of thing. But that book there, Psycho-Cybernetics, that will teach you how to sell you on you. That will get you a robust, rock solid self-image, which is the most important thing, because after that, you can do anything.
You know, still sitting there pardon me again, John. I heartily endorse that encouragement, that suggested recommendation, psycho-cybernetics and self-image psychology, if you want to categorize it, and how the author, Dr. Maxwell Maltz, who was a plastic surgeon, describes in that book, John, as you recall, probably better than me, how he would see in some patients, he'd do a nose job, and notice how there was this massive difference in how the person saw themselves, not just because of the physical change of the nose, but because of the physical changes that happened in here. And that's what you're saying also about selling yourself on yourself and self-acceptance. You haven't disappointed, and I knew you wouldn't. Thank you again for making yourself available. You are our latest featured guest on the Comeback podcast, the Comeback, what do we call it? The Comeback Show podcast. And we're very grateful, and for the viewer and for the listener.
It's been a pleasure, Mike. Anytime, you know that. If you want to do a repeat one and do some more, super happy.
I'm going to accept that right here and now. We'll do that next year in 2023, because I know you're a busy man up until the rest of the year. And yes, I do have some other questions, and I know that this is going to be very worthwhile for our listeners and our viewers as well. For our viewer and for our listener, please do go down to the show notes, click on one of the links, find out more about John, especially if you're a new or a budding new and a prospective new copywriter who's thinking, this sounds all right. I might have. Is it too late for 15-second answer? Is it too late for somebody to get into copywriting?
No way. There are hundreds of thousands of copywriters, but very, very few good ones. And beyond that, very, very few that are good at the business of copywriting. The other thing I'd say, Mike, is this: although like a chunk of my people is people who are brand new, there's also people who've hit a financial glass ceiling. Like they're doing 10K, but they can't get above that 10K. All those people that are just trying to figure out their way forward, they've hit a slump, something like that. So, any copywriter that's in that space where they want to do more, whether it's brand new, hit a slump, glass ceiling, any one of those. Should we wrap?
What's that new YouTube channel called again?
It's I'm trying to get it figured out at the moment, but it's YouTube /Copywriting Bullfighters.
Copywriting Bullfighters. That's right. That's how I first connected with you. could be 5 years ago when you were doing some
Easily,
posts,
yeah.
and just the way you write. I mean, again, can an English major be a good copywriter?
If they can forget a lot of what they learned when they were
It's a
doing
loaded
English
question, John. You and I
So
know
you know
the
what I'm
answer.
talking about there, Mike. Yeah, I mean, good copywriting is conversational, and it's conversational from the point of view that we're trying to create a dialogue. And so what I find a lot of people do is they're writing a monologue to people.
Yeah.
Whereas they're not actually trying to go, if I say this one sentence, what does that make them think? Because I don't know if you're aware of this, but the average person in the world talks at about 150 words a minute. I can get up to about 222 because I've measured it. But the average person is about 150 words a minute. The average person in the world thinks at 600 words per minute. The average person is talking, conveying information at 150 words a minute, and somebody else is thinking at 600 words a minute. Who are they listening to, themselves or the person that's communicating with them?
Yeah, of course.
Now, put that into the context of writing, where we don't have the control of our body language or anything else. We just give them a piece of paper or a screen and they start reading. How quickly do they deviate from what's on that page and go internal? How soon do they start having an internal conversation, which is different than what they're reading? And this is why people come back and go, oh man, I was reading this book and I don't remember the last 3 pages, because you know what? They weren't reading the last 3 pages. Their brain was engaged somewhere else thinking about what they've been reading. And so people have to go back and go, hang on a minute, I didn't get that. Because they literally weren't reading it. They were looking at it. Their eyes were going over it. They thought they was listening to themselves, but they weren't. They was listening to another conversation. And so copywriting is about trying to anticipate. If I say that one sentence there, what's it going to trigger in their head? What are they going to think about because of that? And then what's my next sentence, which is going to fit logically into that thought process?
Who was it, John, that said, engage in the conversation that's already happening in your reader's head? Was it Kennedy or before Kennedy?
One of the old school guys.
One of the old school, and that's what you do so well, even in your blog posts, in your Facebook posts, and I've actually read some of the copy that you've written from a past client, and that's what you do so well, and obviously that's why you've been so successful, and now you're able to share that wisdom with your new students and followers and subscribers and things like that. We will catch up again, John, and I do have more questions, and we will give our audience more of this wisdom and the profundity and the depth of your experience, and we do look forward to it. John, thanks again, and to the listener, thank you for the viewer and listener, thank you for tuning in to the Comeback Coach podcast. And until next time, it's Mike Searles, your host, signing off.
Good day from me.
And good day from John, all the way from Scotland.